Eeming spires of Nexus Prime pierced the perpetual twilight sky as Tejo Park made his way toward the Senate complex. His boots clicked against the polished stone pathway, each step heavy with purpose. As Earth's senior diplomat to the galactic hegemony, he carried the weight of humanity on his shoulders. For 8 centuries, Emperor Daesung had ruled the Thousand Worlds, his Alpharai lineage maintaining control through strategic brutality disguised as order. Tejo adjusted his formal diplomatic sash, the blue and silver colors of Earth standing out among the muted tones preferred by most alien species. He nodded to the praxi guards at the entrance, their 4 eyes tracking his movement with mechanical precision. They allowed him passage without comment. Humans were still novel enough in galactic politics to be granted certain courtesies, though Tejo knew this wouldn't last forever. 3 weeks ago, Tejo had discovered the encrypted files quite by accident. He had been searching the diplomatic archives for precedent on trade agreements when his access key triggered a security breach alert. Instead of locking him out, the system glitched, granting him temporary access to classified military directives. The data was clear: 3 human colony worlds, New Anchorage, Proxima Eden, and Liberty Point, weren't under quarantine as officially reported. They were being systematically sterilized. The evidence was horrifying. Atmospheric processors had been secretly modified to gradually introduce compounds that would render humans infertile within 2 generations. The official explanation of protective measures against cosmic radiation was a careful lie. Over 10 million colonists were being quietly erased from future existence. When Tejo tried bringing this evidence before the Senate Subcommittee for Colonial Affairs, he found every procedural path mysteriously blocked. His speaking slots were rescheduled, then cancelled. Documentation disappeared from official records. His human colleagues suddenly found themselves assigned to distant diplomatic missions. Today marked his 4th failed petition. Tejo stood outside the committee chamber, fists clenched in frustration as the Alpharai chairperson informed him that the matter was considered closed pending further investigation. There would be no further investigation. As Tejo walked through the embassy gardens, seeking solace among the imported Earth flora, a shadow detached itself from behind a tall flowering bush. "They won't let you speak," whispered a feminine voice. Tejo turned to find a slender alien figure watching him. Her scaled skin shimmered in the artificial light of the garden, shifting between blue and green. Minji was a Sokovian, one of the older species in the hegemony. As an archivist with access to historical records going back millennia, she occupied a unique position in the bureaucracy. "There are procedures, channels." Tejo began, automatically falling back on diplomatic protocol. "All controlled by him," she replied, her inner eyelids blinking rapidly in what Tejo recognized as agitation. "I've been documenting his crimes for decades. Humans aren't the first. You're just next on a very long list." Minji glanced around nervously, then pressed a small data crystal into Tejo's palm. "The Dravid system, 90 years ago. The Polani Confederation, 3 centuries past. The Whisper World colonies. All quarantined for their own protection. All systematically destroyed." Tejo's blood ran cold. "Why tell me this?" "Because humans are different," Minji said, her voice barely audible. "The Emperor fears you. Your kind cannot be influenced by his mental controls. That's why he uses these physical methods." A patrolling drone hummed overhead, and Minji shrank back. "Tomorrow. The Historical Archives. Level sub-8. Come alone." Then she was gone, blending with the shadows with practiced ease. That night, Tejo couldn't sleep. He kept seeing the projections from the classified data, birth rates dropping to 0 within 50 years on the affected colonies. Complete extinction within a century. All without firing a single weapon. In his apartment, Tejo inserted Minji's crystal into his secure reader. The files were ancient, some dating back to the early days of the hegemony. Species after species showed the same pattern: initial resistance to Alpharai rule, followed by quarantine measures, followed by gradual demographic decline. Outside his window, the artificial stars of Nexus Prime glittered. Somewhere in that vast blackness, millions of humans were slowly being erased. And the galaxy didn't know or didn't care. Tejo made his decision. He would meet Minji tomorrow. Diplomatic channels had failed. Perhaps it was time to try something else, something the mighty Emperor Daesun would never expect from a mere human diplomat. The Senate Grand Hall stretched impossibly high, its architecture designed to make representatives feel small. Taeho stood at the entrance, momentarily awed despite his many visits. The ceiling was lost in shadow hundreds of meters above. Soft blue lights marked the paths between sections, dividing the 1,000 worlds into their political blocks and alliances. The human section was small, just 3 seats for Earth and its closest colonies. Taeho watched as the Altherai ceremonial guards took their positions before the session began. Their armor gleamed with a metallic purple sheen, ceremonial spears held at precise angles. Though purely decorative in modern times, the message was clear: the emperors will maintain order through strength. "Remember," whispered Juno, his assistant, matching his stride as they walked toward the human delegation seats, "absolute protocol adherence." Last month Representative Sunwoo tried to speak out of turn and her translator implant was remotely deactivated. Taeho nodded grimly. He recalled the incident well. Sunwoo had been unable to communicate for the remainder of the session while trying to raise concerns about water rights on a contested moon. By the time the technical issue was resolved, the vote had already passed. "I've memorized the procedure handbook," Taeho replied quietly. "All 4,000 pages of it." The Senate operated under thousands of procedural rules, each seemingly designed to prevent any real challenge to authority. Species were called upon to speak in order of their admission to the hegemony. Humans, being newcomers, were near the end. The speaking time allotted decreased with each passing hour. By the time Earth's turn came, they would have barely 3 minutes. Today, Taeho had a carefully crafted statement prepared. He had spent days working within the Byzantine constraints of Senate protocol, finding a legitimate way to introduce his evidence about the sterilization program. His hands trembled slightly as he touched the data crystal in his pocket. The proceedings began with ritual invocations to the Emperor's wisdom. Taeho watched the clock, counting down the hours until Earth's slot. When his turn finally came, he stepped forward confidently. "The delegation from Earth wishes to submit evidence regarding the quarantine procedures on human colonies," he began, each word measured. When Taeho attempted to introduce his evidence during the appointed sharing period, his podium simply retracted into the floor. He found himself standing in a shallow depression, his prepared speech cut off mid-sentence. The Senate President, an ancient Altherai with pale blue scales, didn't even acknowledge the interruption. "Next item," the President announced, as if nothing had happened. Taeho stood in shock for several seconds before Juno pulled him back to their section. "I followed every rule," Taeho hissed. "Every single one." "Rules change," Juno replied grimly. "Sometimes between one breath and the next." That evening, Taeho met Minji in a forgotten archive room deep beneath the Senate building. Dust covered ancient physical records from the early days of the hegemony. The lighting was perfect for their clandestine meeting. Minji's scale fingers danced across an ancient console, bringing up recordings from centuries past. "Watch," she instructed. The holographic display showed Senate sessions from various eras. In the oldest recordings, representatives argued fiercely, interrupting each other, showing emotions from rage to joy. As the recordings advanced through time, the sessions became increasingly formal, structured, and emotionless. "What changed?" Taeho asked, though he suspected the answer. "The Emperor's power grew," Minji explained, her inner eyelids blinking slowly. As his psychic abilities strengthened, he could influence more species, calm their minds, direct their thoughts. The protocols weren't needed then. Most representatives simply felt an overwhelming urge to agree with Altherai proposals. Later, Minji explained what few knew: humans were uniquely resistant to the Emperor's psychic influence that kept other species compliant. "The physical restraints of Senate protocol exist because your minds cannot be controlled like ours," she said, showing him ancient recordings. "Your brainwaves operate on different frequencies. Your emotions are too chaotic. The Emperor cannot get a grip on human thoughts." "So the rules are for us?" Taeho asked. "For you, and any other species too primitive to be properly controlled," Minji confirmed. and the millennial assembly approaches. The Emperor will be physically present for the first time in 50 years. Taeho felt his pulse quicken. The actual Emperor? Not a projection? True physical presence, Minji confirmed. Required by the oldest founding laws even he cannot break without undermining the entire system. Taeho began formulating a plan. If the Emperor himself would be present, perhaps there was a way to break through the procedural barriers. He would need to research ancient protocols, find loopholes, prepare contingencies. I need access to the original Senate Charter, he told Minji. Not the current version, the original founding documents. Minji's scales darkened with worry. Those are sealed in the Imperial Archives. Even I cannot access them. Then we'll find another way in, Taeho said, a dangerous determination hardening his voice. The Emperor thinks his chains of protocol have bound us completely. He's about to discover how resourceful humans can be when our survival is at stake. The attack on New Terra happened without warning. The colony's golden wheat fields and blue lakes vanished in flashes of light that could be seen from orbit. 8 million dead in hours. Taeho watched the incoming reports with horror, his hands shaking as he held the datapad. The official report blamed separatist terrorists, claiming a radical human faction had targeted their own people to provoke a war. But the encrypted transmission Taeho received from his contact in the Imperial Communications Hub told the truth. This was the Emperor's direct order. The attack patterns matched Imperial fleet formations perfectly. The weapon signatures were unmistakably Alpharai. Taeho's private quarters in the diplomatic wing became a crisis center. His communication screen flashed constantly with incoming messages from Earth. He had been awake for 36 hours straight, his eyes red-rimmed, when the secure call from Admiral Jaiwan came through. The Admiral's face was grim, the metals on her uniform glinting under harsh light. Behind her, Taeho could see the war room of Earth's Space Command. "We've reviewed your evidence," she said without preamble. "It confirms our worst fears." "Then we must respond," Taeho urged. "The galaxy needs to know what happened." Admiral Jaiwan shook her head slowly. "Earth's military command is furious but realistic. We're outgunned 1,000 to 1. A direct response would mean extinction. So we do nothing?" Taeho's voice cracked with emotion. "Not nothing," the Admiral replied. "We buy time. Build strength secretly. Find allies. But open confrontation now." She drew a finger across her throat in the ancient gesture. The call ended, leaving Taeho feeling more alone than ever. He paced his quarters, mind racing through options, each seemingly worse than the last. The diplomatic channels were closed to him. Military response was suicide. What remained? 3 days after the New Terra massacre, a formal message arrived. Emperor Daesung would grant Taeho a private audience. No other human had ever received such an invitation. "It's a trap," Juno warned, his young face tight with concern. "You shouldn't go." "If I don't, I might as well pack up and return to Earth," Taeho replied, adjusting his formal diplomatic uniform. "This may be our only chance to learn something useful." The Imperial Chamber was located at the very top of the Senate spire. Taeho was scanned 7 times on his journey upward, each checkpoint more thorough than the last. By the time he reached the final door, he was certain they knew his exact cellular structure. When Taeho was finally admitted to the Emperor's presence, he felt strangely calm. He understood this audience was meant to intimidate him. The room was designed to overwhelm. Massive windows showed the curve of the planet below, stars stretching to infinity beyond. Yet the Emperor's actual physical form was surprisingly small, belying the immense psychic power he wielded. Daesung sat on a floating throne that hummed with energy. His body was barely a meter tall, with delicate limbs and large, multifaceted eyes. His skin had a translucent quality, showing shadows of organs beneath. For slender arms were folded precisely across his chest. "Approach, human," the Emperor said, his translator rendering his clicks and whistles into smooth speech. Taeho walked forward until he stood 10 paces from the throne. He performed the required bow, precisely as the protocol dictated, deep enough to show respect, but not so deep as to suggest submission. "You wish to see me, Your Eminence?" Taeho kept his voice level. The Emperor's eyes rotated in their sockets, focusing on different aspects of Taeho simultaneously. "You have been causing disruptions, human diplomat. Seeking information not meant for your kind. Making accusations that could destabilize the peace of 1,000 worlds. I seek only the truth about what happened to New Terra," Taeho replied. "Truth?" The Emperor's voice had an amused quality. "Truth is what I declare it to be." Taeho felt a pressure against his mind, like an invisible hand trying to squeeze his thoughts. He concentrated on his breathing, using the mental defense techniques Earth's psychic core had developed. "Your species is troublesome," Daesung said, his tone shifting to something colder. "Your minds resist proper guidance. Your emotions run hot and unpredictable. But ultimately, you will be managed like all others. Either through subjugation or extinction." "We just want peace," Taeho replied carefully. The Emperor's mouth parts formed what might have been a smile. "Peace through dominance is the only lasting kind." Taeho felt a chill run through him at the casual menace in those words. This was no diplomatic meeting, it was a predator playing with its food. New Terra was merely a demonstration, the Emperor continued. A sample of what awaits should humans continue their independent thinking. Return to your world, diplomat. Tell them to prepare for integration into the greater harmony of my rule. As Taeho was escorted out, his mind was racing. The Emperor had made a critical mistake. He had confirmed his responsibility for New Terra, assuming Taeho would be too intimidated to use this information. But more importantly, he had revealed something vital: he truly feared humanity's independence. That night, Taeho sent a heavily encrypted message to Earth: "The Emperor is afraid of us. Find me the original Senate Charter. There must be something there we can use against him." The response came hours later: "Charter located in restricted archives on Earth. Sending now. Operation Breaking Point is authorized." Minji's claws clicked nervously against the ancient stone table as she unrolled the fragile document. Taeho leaned forward, squinting at the faded text. They were deep in the forgotten archives beneath the Senate building, surrounded by dust and silence. "It's called the Right of Physical Challenge," Minji explained, showing Taeho the ancient text she had uncovered. Her scaled finger traced the ornate letters that glowed faintly under her touch. From before the Alpha dominated completely. Representatives could challenge policies through actual combat. "That's barbaric," Taeho said, pulling back slightly. "And effective," she countered. This law was never formally removed from the founding documents. Merely buried. Taeho ran his hand through his hair, leaving it standing on end. "So any representative can challenge another to physical combat over a policy dispute?" "Not just any policy," Minji said. "Only when accusations of planetary genocide are made. The founders understood such claims required immediate resolution." Taeho paced the small room, mind racing. "And the Emperor himself? Can he be challenged directly?" Minji's inner eyelids flickered rapidly, her species equivalent of a nervous swallow. "According to the original charter, yes. The Emperor holds his position because he is considered the highest representative of the Alpharai people. Has anyone ever challenged an emperor before? Once, 3,000 years ago. A Drovian ambassador challenged Emperor Kaesung, Daesung's ancestor." Minji paused. "The Drovian species is now extinct." Taeho sat heavily in a dusty chair. "So it's suicide?" "Perhaps. But there's something you should know." Minji lowered her voice further. "The Imperial line maintains power through psychic dominance. In physical combat, without those abilities, they might be vulnerable," Taeho finished. "Especially against humans who are resistant to their mental powers." Taeho spent the next 3 weeks in consultation with Earth's military strategists. Admiral Jaiwan personally oversaw the operation, connecting Taeho with Earth's most advanced medical and military technologies. "These modifications are experimental," the chief medical officer warned as Taeho was prepared for the first procedure. We've never pushed human enhancement this far. The pain was excruciating. Taeho underwent a series of extreme biological modifications. Human strength enhanced beyond its natural limits, reaction time accelerated, pain receptors temporarily dampened. His bones were reinforced with carbon lattice. His muscles densified. Neural transmitters were upgraded with synthetic compounds. Between surgeries, he trained relentlessly in combat simulations against Alpha-Rai models. The Emperor's species had evolved on a high-gravity world, giving them natural strength despite their small size. Their forearms could strike from unexpected angles. Remember, his combat instructor said, their natural instinct is to attack mentally first. They'll waste precious seconds trying to influence your mind before realizing it's ineffective. The day of the Millennial Assembly arrived too quickly. Taeho felt simultaneously stronger than ever and terrifyingly unprepared. The biological modifications left him in constant discomfort, his new body still felt foreign. The modifications will only last about 6 hours before your system begins rejecting them, the medical officer reminded him. After that, it won't matter anyway, Taeho finished grimly. Representatives from all 1,000 worlds filled the Senate Hall. The atmosphere was tense with anticipation. The Millennial Assembly was more than a political gathering. It was a religious experience for many species who viewed the Emperor as divine. Emperor Daesung entered to ritual chanting, his ceremonial armor glinting. Unlike his everyday appearance, for this sacred occasion he wore an exoskeleton that increased his height to nearly 3 meters. Golden plates shaped like flames extended from his shoulders. His forearms carried traditional weapons, ceremonial now, but originally designed for combat. Taeho's heart raced as he watched the procession. The moment was approaching. Beside him, Juno looked pale. "Are you sure about this?" Juno whispered. "No," Taeho admitted. "But 8 million dead deserve justice." When the ceremonial opening concluded, Taeho rose from his seat. The motion sensor should have activated his microphone, but nothing happened. As expected, the system had been programmed to ignore him. Taeho pressed the emergency override that Minji had installed on his communication device. When he spoke, his voice boomed throughout the vast chamber. "I, Taeho Park, representative of Earth, invoke the right of physical challenge against Emperor Daesung on charges of planetary genocide." Silence fell across the hall. Then confusion. The translation systems initially refused to relay his words. But Minji had helped him bypass the filters, and his challenge rang throughout the hall in every language of the 1,000 worlds. The Emperor froze on his throne. His large eyes fixed on Taeho with obvious shock, then narrowed in calculation. Taeho could feel the psychic pressure as the Emperor tried to reach into his mind, to force him to stand down. It slid off him like water on oil. Around the hall, representatives murmured in confusion. Many clearly had no knowledge of this ancient rite. The Senate president rushed to confer with imperial advisors, frantically checking records. Finally, the Emperor rose. His translator projected his voice across the hall. "The human invokes ancient law," he said, his tone carefully controlled. "How interesting." The Senate president approached, clearly distressed. "Your Magnificence, we can declare this invalid, there are procedures." The Emperor silenced him with a gesture. Taeho understood why immediately. To reject the challenge would suggest fear. The Emperor, bound by his own laws and unwilling to appear weak, accepted, certain that his Alpha-Rai physiology would easily overcome a mere human. "I accept the challenge," the Emperor declared, his voice echoing through the hall. "Let the ancient rite be honored." As ceremonial guards cleared the central floor, Taeho stepped forward, feeling the weight of human destiny on his shoulders. The combat began with formal declarations. An ancient official with skin like parchment read the rules from a ceremonial scroll. Taeho stood in the center of the Senate floor, the enhanced muscles beneath his simple diplomatic uniform tensed and ready. Across from him, Emperor Daesung had removed his ceremonial outer robes, revealing the sleek combat exoskeleton beneath. As challenger, the human may select weapons, the official announced. "No weapons," Taeho said clearly. Hands only. The Emperor's eyes narrowed. This was unexpected. Althari had 4 arms, giving them a natural advantage in unarmed combat. As challenged, the Emperor may set terms of victory, the official continued. To First Blood, the Emperor stated, his translator making his clicks sound almost smug. Or surrender. When the Emperor attempted to change terms at the last moment, he leaned toward the official and whispered something. The official nodded and began to announce, the combat zone will be restricted to. Tejo surprised everyone by lunging forward with impossible speed. The crowd gasped. One moment he stood still, the next he crossed the 10 meters between them faster than most eyes could follow. The Emperor barely had time to raise his arms before Tejo was upon him. A shimmering field appeared around the Emperor, his personal shield activating automatically. For a heartbeat, it seemed to hold. Then it sparked and collapsed completely. The Emperor's personal shields flickered and failed, confronted with technology secretly developed on Earth specifically to counter Althari defenses. The shield failure clearly shocked the Emperor. He had never fought without this protection. His 4 arms struck out, but Tejo easily dodged the blows. The human's enhanced reflexes made the Emperor's movements seem slow and clumsy. Instead of striking back, Tejo seized the Emperor by his ceremonial collar. The rich fabric, woven with status-signifying metals and embedded command circuits, tore slightly under his enhanced grip. "What are you doing?" hissed the Emperor, his translator unable to hide his alarm. "Release me at once." But Tejo had no intention of simply winning the combat. He began dragging the Emperor down the central aisle of the Senate Hall. His enhanced strength made the Emperor seem light as a child. The stunned silence in the hall was broken only by the sound of the Emperor's armor scraping against the polished floor. "Stop him," the Emperor commanded his guards. But they hesitated. Their programming prevented any action that might harm the Emperor, and with Tejo holding him so close, they couldn't intervene for fear of injuring their master. "Watch your divine ruler," Tejo called out, his voice broadcasting to every world in the hegemony as he forced the Emperor past representatives of every species he had oppressed. "See how mortal he truly is." The Emperor struggled, his 4 arms flailing, but Tejo's grip was unbreakable. As they passed the Dravian delegation, Tejo paused. 3 centuries ago, he ordered your homeworld's oceans poisoned because you questioned his authority. Moving on to the Kiltari section. Your species' reproductive cycle was artificially altered to create dependency on imperial medicine. With each revelation, gasps and murmurs spread through the hall. The Emperor tried to speak, but Tejo continued dragging him past delegation after delegation, naming crime after crime. Simultaneously, Minji activated the data crystal she had prepared. Every information display in the Senate Hall and across the connected world suddenly showed evidence of the Emperor's crimes across the galactic network. Documents, recordings, genetic analysis, planetary surveys, thousands of years of carefully hidden atrocities exposed in an instant. The once silent Senate erupted as thousands of years of fear began to unravel. Some representatives fell to their knees in shock. Others leapt to their feet, voices raised in anger or disbelief. A few of the Emperor's most loyal species tried to rush forward, but found themselves blocked by others who had suffered too long. "I could kill you," Tejo said quietly to the Emperor, away from the microphones. "But that would make you a martyr. Instead, you'll live to see everything you built crumble." Finally, Tejo released the Emperor at the foot of his own throne. "The challenge is complete," he announced formally. "First blood has been drawn." He pointed to the Emperor's collar, where a small cut on his neck had left a streak of blue fluid on the torn fabric. In the days that followed, the hegemony trembled and realigned. The Emperor's psychic hold broken, species after species declared independence. The Imperial Guard stood down, many revealing they had been mentally controlled for generations. A provisional council formed to maintain essential services across the 1,000 worlds. When offered positions of power, Tejo declined them all. Instead, he helped organize the first truly democratic election the galaxy had ever known. 6 months later, back on Earth, Tejo sat in a simple garden watching the sunset. His body had returned to normal after the enhancements wore off, leaving him with aches that would likely never fully fade. A message tablet sat beside him, filled with reports of the new Galactic Alliance's progress. Humans didn't free the galaxy because we were stronger, Tejo later wrote in his memoirs. We freed it because we remembered something the others had forgotten, that tyrants are still mortal, and silence is consent. On a distant world, in a secure facility, the former Emperor Daesung sat in comfortable but permanent confinement, watching as everything he had built was transformed into something he had never imagined possible, a galaxy of equals. The end.